Teddy Covers coming to us live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Friday morning. Happy Friday to you, Teddy. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right, Jimmy. How about yourself? Happy Friday, buddy.
Oh, yeah. It's I had another example of, and we've talked about it, and I opened the show talking about how Teddy and I talk about this because it's so important, but I had another episode last night where Friday's my in and out day for payment with my action, and I had the Predators minus 1.5, and they were up 4-1 going in the third period, out shooting the Flames 27-9. And the Flames were on the second half of a back-to-back. And I don't want to dwell on this too long, but what happened was, the Flames come back, and they tie it up with 3 minutes left. And then Austin Watson scores to make a 5-4 with 1:20 seconds left. And I'm on the puck line, so I get a little bit of hope. But then Kachuk scores 20 seconds later. And for whatever reason, that roller coaster of emotions and that $520 swing, I just had insomnia. And I was like, God, what's wrong with me? I was like, trying to get out of it all night, and like it's just a game, but insomnia reared its ugly head, and I'm just talking it out because I don't want this stuff to continue. I want to be able to handle the losses better, but it was another night of I was upset. And that's what's going on with me, Teddy.
So, Jimmy, I don't mean to laugh. I'm only laughing because what you're going through and what you go through is what everybody goes through. And when it happens to you, you're like, what the F is wrong with me? You know, how come I can't get over this? You're human. We're all human. And there are some losses, for whatever reason, they're going to sting more than other losses. And last night you had one. And you thought, you're looking good going to the third, and then all of a sudden it's not looking good. And then you have a whiff of your chance at the end, and no, it's not working out that way. Those are normal reactions. And as bettors, we're going to have emotions that come into play all the time. That's who we are. It's the nature of what we do. What we try to do, Jimmy, is have our moment with those losses, but not let them linger. When you have an insomnia night and you can't sleep and stuff's making you crazy, that tells you that the next day you got to take it back a notch. Exhale, breathe. And especially this time of year, I see it happen more in late October and November when all the sports converge and everybody, the weather changes and the days get shorter and everybody's kind of walking around a little miserable in a way that they weren't walking around miserable a month ago, just because of the workload and the pressure. You got to breathe and you got to let this stuff go. And until you're focused, until you're clear, you can't really cap for the next day and the next group of games that you're looking at. So I hope that you can get that, because that's honestly one of the most important factors we can have in sports handicapping. And I don't know how else to say it except just breathe, brother. Just breathe.
Oh, it's really nice to hear that. And it's just sometimes I just need to say things out loud, know that I'm not alone, take a deep breath, and start hammering this card. So let's get after it, and thank you for those soothing words, Teddy. Let's move on. We've been talking NFL with Donnie Rightside for the last 20 minutes. Do you have, and I love this card, man. I love it, and I hammered it hard on Tuesday, and I'm excited, very excited about Sunday. Do you have any looks on this card that you find a very appealing angles?
Yeah, there's no shortage of looks on this card that I'm interested in for the NFL. Let me just get, I got the notes here and everything over there, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to be conscious. So I played Buffalo. I laid 9 with the Bills. 9.5, I have no problem laying with the Bills. I found a 9, and I bet it. It's a Redskins team that has shown no ability to put the football in the end zone for more than a month now. Case Keenum's not practicing. He's supposed to go this weekend. They're hoping he's going to go. But you have a lousy offensive line, no skill position talent, QB situation that's a mess, and a Bills team that's mad, and a Bills defense that can score, and a Bills team that couldn't throw downfield last week because of the wind conditions. That's not going to be the case this week. I don't expect Washington to put up a whole lot of fight. The quotes out of that locker room are not good ones. And this is a Bill spot. I laid 9. And again, even at 9.5, I have no problems laying with Buffalo. I think that's a one-sided ball game. I played the Steelers. I'm the one. There's been all Indy money this week. From a defensive standpoint, there is an enormous, and I got the plus, I think a +1 with Pittsburgh. I got a 1.5. I think I got a 1. Yeah, I wrote down +1. So I got the 1 with Pittsburgh, and I probably bet this one too early because there are 1.5s out there, and who knows? Indy appears to be a very popular choice right now. You look at the defensive numbers for these two teams, there's no comparison. There really isn't. Against the pass, against the run, Pittsburgh good, Indy bad. It's pretty, again, from the hard numbers, it's pretty significant. Oh, and Pittsburgh's played a tougher schedule than Indy so far, significantly tougher than Indy, and I'm getting them at pick 'em at home. I understand they have cluster injuries at running back. I don't care. I'll take the better defense. And remember, the Steelers are fighting for their season. The Colts have just won 3 in a row in 5 of their last 6. It's a little different mentality for these two teams. And Pittsburgh showed me something. When they were down 14-0 in Miami, that could have been a bye-bye Mike Tomlin, we're done. And instead, the fact that I understand it was the Dolphins, but Pittsburgh had to show something in that game, and they did, and they dominated the rest of the way. And to me, that was a buy sign. I took a point with the Steelers in a game I expected to win. I took the Lions and the Raiders over the total. Boy, you look at some of these stats for that. Oakland hasn't taken a sack in 3 weeks. They're not turning the ball over. Carr's been really good. And while the Raiders' skill position talent's a bunch of no-names, they've been making plays. Oakland's been moving the football up and down the field. Detroit, with cluster injuries in their secondary, I think the Raiders get theirs. The other side of the equation, Oakland's pass defense has been god-awful. They're not getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks either. The secondary's been lit up. We know that the Detroit's downfield passing game is potent, and I see that game as a game with touchdowns, not field goals. So I like Lions and Raiders over. I got 50.5 in my pocket, and that's still the prevailing number. And last but not least, the game that you and Donnie were talking about when I came on just a few minutes ago, I laid 3 with Cleveland, and I made a big bet on the Browns at that price. If ever there's a get-right spot, this is the get-right spot. And I understand Donnie's concerns where you talk about, if Cleveland has 14 penalties and 6 turnovers, you're not going to win that game. That's possible, but this is a circle the wagons game for the Browns as they step down in class. You look at who they played over the last 5 weeks and who they're playing this week. I'm not committed, and I don't like what I'm hearing out of Denver's locker room right now. The Fangio experiment, dicey at best. And again, I laid 3, so I get the best of the number there. But I thought the Browns were worthy of a significant wager at that price.
I love it. I'm with you on the Browns. I did not take the over in Lions Raiders, and I know why. And this is a handicapping mistake. Could be coming a handicapping mistake. Maybe I could fix it. But the reason is I lost last week's Raiders-Texans over by a half point. And I know that's getting in the way for so much that I didn't even really probably put enough time into capping it because that was staring me in the face. I think I've made a mistake backing the Redskins. I did get +10 earlier in the week. But your breakdown makes sense, and I am concerned about my Colts play from earlier in the week. So it's funny that you're on the two sides. I've made a ton of looks on this card, and those are ones I'm uncomfortable with. And to hear you on the other side makes me even more uncomfortable. But love that you're with me on the Browns, and I think their Lions Raiders over makes a ton of sense. There's Teddy's NFL looks: Bills, Steelers, Browns, Lions, Raiders over. Now we didn't have time, and we're going to focus on NBA in the late show. But I did say that we will ask Teddy about his NBA looks. I jumped on one move earlier today, and that was the over in the Rockets Nets, and I got 141.5. It's now, I'm going to move over to it. I believe it was at 241.5. I believe now it's at 243. Have you made any moves on this NBA card? I'm 9-5 with a 26% plus 26% ROI early in the season. Feel very good and love having you in the mornings and J Money at night. It just seems to be working very well. Are you making any moves on this NBA card?
So first, congrats on your hot start. That's awesome. Second, I wouldn't talk you out of that over by any stretch of the imagination. Although, the talk from Kenny Atkinson, he's worried about the Brooklyn's offensive efficiency right now. He's like, we're not running any offense. I don't know what the hell we're doing out there. So that does concern me here. And of course, I don't know if the Rockets are going to give up 62% shooting this time around. But I certainly wouldn't talk you out of it. I did not make a bet on today's NBA card. There was 2 that I was close with. I didn't pull the trigger on either. I was close with the Bulls laying against the Pistons, and I just kind of talked myself out of that one. I was worried about Derrick Rose going back to Chicago. Rose has been real good for Detroit with Reggie Jackson out. And I laid points with the Bulls the other night, and they did again, and they are struggling down the stretch of close games. So I did not lay with Chicago. I was leaned in that way, but I didn't pull the trigger. And I leaned Knicks under. That Knicks Celtics under, and then it got literally as I was getting ready to bet it, it just got boom, 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 steamed, and I lost 3 points, and I'm like, well, so much for that. They were thinking of it just at the time that I was thinking of it, but Knicks have been an under machine so far this season. They got lit up by Boston last week. Boston punched, they didn't punch back. There was a lot of talk about different defensive intensity this time around against the Celtics. So I leaned Celtics Knicks under, but like I said, I did not. I missed the best of the number, and I didn't pull the trigger as a result.
Understandable. Both looks make sense, and we will break down the entire card with Jay Money on the Late Show. So we've got NFL, NBA. Let's move on. Oh, sorry, my bad. Teddy B in the chat, who's put so much energy into our chat. Great capper. My fault. He asked about what you were thinking in this Vikings spot, and I know that there's no line Vikings Chiefs right now waiting for Mahomes, but he was asking what your thoughts were on this game, and if you there's a lot of moving parts, but we have no line and no total.
Yeah, and I thought we'd have one by now. This is my thought. I'm not going to take Kansas City with Matt Moore at quarterback. Okay, if Mahomes is there, there's a chance it's a tough matchup for KC. Okay, when you think about the concept of that Vikings offensive line and Dalvin Cook running the football against a defense that can't stop the run, and the way teams have been able to beat Kansas City this year, which is grind out clock, keep the offense off the field, and just run for one first down after the next. I think Minnesota is very capable of doing that, and I would not be shocked in the slightest to see the Vikings have success doing that. All that being said, if I'm laying 3.5 with Minnesota, I'm not going to do it. The point spread here should be 3, whether it's Minnesota laying 3, whether it's KC laying 3, and that's my differential between Moore and Mahomes. I guess my thought process is like this: if Mahomes plays and I'm catching 3 with Minnesota, I might be interested. I don't know that I'm going to lay with Minnesota in this spot, and I probably lean in their direct. I probably lean Vikings here. It's not a game I spent a ton of time with all week because it's not a game where there's been a line out. So I'm just kind of thinking about it as we speak. And I had it in the back of my head with that matchup where Minnesota should be able to run the football very successfully in this ball game, which may make for an over, for whatever that's worth. Not like it's hard to bet a Chiefs game over the total. This might be one of them. Although if Minnesota does what they're supposed to do and grind clock and shorten the game, and then maybe there won't be enough possessions to get it over. So I guess I have mixed feelings. I'm kind of talking it out, Jimmy, as you do. And that's something we do. Sometimes you talk out a game, and it helps me to talk out a game. Or a process, or a bad beat, or whatever it is. But no, I don't have a strong opinion, clearly, on this one.
One last quick question, and we got to get into NCAA football, but 41S McDonald says, Teddy, what about the under in Browns Broncos? Under in Browns Broncos, low total, but new quarterback for Denver, and both Teddy and I are on the Browns. What do you think of the total in that game?
I don't have a strong opinion on it really at all at 39. Cleveland should be able to shut Denver down. My hunch is, and one of the reasons I like the Browns as much as I do this week, is because I think if they get a lead, they're going to keep punching. So that makes me a little bit reluctant to take an under here, but I don't know that Denver's going to score, which makes me a little reluctant to take an over here. So it's just not a total I got a strong take on.
I have some fear, too, that the Browns are going to keep punching, and so that was exactly why I have stayed off of it. Okay, let's roll into NCAA football, and I wasn't with Teddy yesterday, so what I have from Teddy is on Tuesday, we got Oregon State +6, Boston College +3, Ole Miss +19.5, Hawaii -2.5. On Wednesday, Nebraska -2.5, USC +5, and you were about to pull the trigger on UCLA. Did you pull the trigger, and did you add any plays yesterday?
I did pull the trigger on UCLA yesterday at -6.5, and I made one additional play between yesterday and today. I got myself right back on the Central Michigan Chippewas, +1.5 against Northern Illinois. The more I was reading about that game and the more I was thinking about that game, the more I wanted to take Central one more time. I understand they had a turnover debacle in Buffalo last week. I also understand they're home dogs on a field where they're undefeated this year. And Northern Illinois has cluster injury problems at linebacker, and Central Michigan is primed to dominate the line of scrimmage on the defensive side of the football. I think the Chips win the game, and I'm catching a 1.5. So I took Central. That's betting number 354, and then 346 UCLA. I laid 6.5 with the Bruins. And is that line at 7 now? I thought it was. There were some leading indicator 7s this morning, but I know there were plenty of 6.5 still when I got down. Yeah, it's still 6.5 at most locations. Worth noting the sharper books are already at 7.
I like it. And JF was just asking where we were at with CMU this week. Anthony Devontae, if you could join us for the Audible at 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll go through each of these games, but we need Teddy desperately for NCAA football. He is our lone NCAA football capper, and so we need him badly here, and we only have a short amount of time. So, okay, let's keep rolling along here. A lot of people liking Navy earlier in this week, and we saw it go up to 27. Now it's down to 25.5. What do you think about this Navy-Connecticut game this evening?
I really don't have a strong take on it at all. You know, Navy's a team that I don't want to step in front of right now. Navy's also a team that I'm not excited about laying this type of a price with. I mean, how many games have they won by this? I guess they beat East Carolina early. And then the one game against South Florida, where South Florida was awful and turned the ball over. And UConn's capable of doing that. I mean, I'm not convinced the Huskies are going to be able to stop Navy. I'm not convinced Navy's going to make a whole bunch of big plays. Then again, UConn back-to-back point spread covers. They've been I almost hate to say it, because there are times where they get wiped off the field. We've seen a number of those games this season. That hasn't been the case in recent weeks. And again, if you were respecting the sharp money on the dogs last night, certainly the Georgia Southern dog, that was sharp money was spot on. I don't know that I'm looking to fade that sharp money here with a Navy team that, again, the quick strike potential, it's there. I mean, Navy may get a big play touchdown or 2 in this game against UConn's defense, but I'm not going to ask them to win it by 4 touchdowns. It's a little bit much for me. Pass. Clear pass.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, we have our first questions coming in. Anybody with questions, feel free to throw them at us. And you know what? I shouldn't have just shut it down, Anthony. If I will copy and paste this, and if we have time at the end of the show, I'll throw them at him if questions in NCAA football aren't coming in. All right, Rich G says, can you ask Teddy about Wake at minus 7.5, rotation number 309, 310, being 7.5, open at 7.5, and still there. This total opened up at 61, now 60.5 or 60. What do you think about backing 23 ranked Wake Forest at home this weekend?
So, I mean, the markets are crashing on NC State right now, and you can understand why. Their quarterback play has been dismal in recent weeks. They're coming off a bye and still don't know what they're doing at the QB position. The offense, the last time the offense gained 400 yards was week 2 at home against Western Carolina. It's been a while. So the one thing we know about NC State, they're not likely to be able to trade points with a high-octane offense like Wake. Now, Wake hasn't been covering numbers. They started out the season like gangbusters. Their last 3 ball games, they have failed to. Florida State was right around the number. But, they scored 59 against Louisville and didn't cover. And against Boston College, they won by 3. And didn't cover. They're not a great defensive team, and that concerns me laying more than a touchdown with a team that may not be able to get that stop, that all-important stop, to cover the number late. But NC State, for me, is a one-way team. I'm not interested in that side. So if I'm playing, I'm laying, but I'm not all that interested in the Wake side here.
Not interested in the Wake side. Then we get to Kansas State. We talked about it all week. Our guy, your guy, a man we love very much, Jensen Bonson, who came second and beat the prick last year, says K-State letdown against Kansas. Kansas State opening up at 6.5. Bookmakers taking it down to 4.5, as is UWager. 5's on the board, 5.5 at Pinnacle. Total drop from 57.5 to 54 or 54.5. Is this a letdown spot for K-State?
It is a letdown spot. Then again, they're facing their in-state rival. So it's not a game. You automatically assume, all right, we beat a huge team, therefore there's nothing left in the tank next week. And I'm not convinced that's the case. If I'm taking Kansas in this ballgame, It's not because I fear I'm expecting K-State to lay down. It's because I think Kansas is good enough to hang around in this ball game. And I mean, look at the Jayhawks. They're hanging around in games. They're hanging around with Texas. They're beating Texas Tech. They're hanging around with West Virginia at home. They're beating Boston College. I mean, they had the one bad game on the road at TCU. And, they ran into the Oklahoma buzzsaw that you can't take too much away from Kansas from that game. But it's certainly a Jayhawks team that is showing signs right now of 3 straight covers of being, you just bet on this team. And those are the type of teams I'm looking for, where you say, all right, we look at Kansas over the back half of the campaign. Are they going to be covering numbers? Momentum is there. The injury situation isn't too nasty. It's a first-year head coach. First-year head coaches, their teams tend to improve as the season goes on. So I think there are some legitimate buy signs for the Jayhawks in a program that's been so far down for so long. They're even mediocre. You can make money with Kansas. The problem, of course, is that Kansas State's A game is going to blow. I think it's going to be a good notch or two better than Kansas's. And winning last week, that's confidence-inducing. They haven't turned the ball over in each of the last 2 weeks. I know they played a bad game at Okie State on the road, but we also saw them go on the road and beat up Mississippi State pretty good. And that win doesn't look as good in retrospect, but the fact that Mississippi State dominated them the year before and they went down there and won, this isn't a team I'm afraid to back on the highway, not by any stretch of the imagination. All this is a long talk of me saying I can make a case for K-State and I can make a case for Kansas, and that means I'm probably sitting this one on the sidelines. Pass.
A pass there, but a very interesting breakdown. Shadow, Antoine Seymour, BT, all asking about the same game. Guru Sportsbet says, I told y'all early. Memphis by 10 or more. 15-ranked SMU at 24-ranked Memphis. All eyes on Memphis on Saturday evening. Memphis opening up at -3, now 5.5, and a lot of 6s. This total opened at 70.5. We saw 72s yesterday, now back to 71.5s. SMU, Memphis. After talking about it all week, what's your final strategy on this game, or are you laying off?
So, I'm not going to play it. If I was going to play it, I'm going to respect the money that poured in on Memphis earlier in the week. And the Tigers' offense is clicking right now on all cylinders. The fact that they, and they stole that. They escaped with the win at Tulsa last week. That's fine. When you see an undefeated team that's a dog and the money's pouring in against them in this spot, it kind of tells you what you need to know. And, of course, Memphis, they've been losing the turnover battle 3 times in the last 4 weeks. That may not happen here against SMU. I went with SMU last week against Houston. That was a wrong side. I was betting against Houston, and obviously Houston, SMU was +2 in turnovers in that game and still didn't sniff a point spread cover. And these teams, when the pressure ratchets, as it goes up, and as we get into November, the teams like SMU tend to let down. So I guess what I'm saying in a long way is if I'm playing, I'm laying. Don't trust the Mustangs to keep that undefeated season going. And I do respect the sharp money that absolutely poured in on Memphis from the opener here.
That makes a perfect sense. Anthony Mastronardi, our guy out of Windsor, Ontario, says, ask Teddy about TCU Oklahoma State game. -3 seems short versus a bad TCU team. What do you think?
Well, the question is, how bad is TCU? Honestly, there's TCU's bad games have been pretty bad. TCU's good games have been pretty good. They played a pretty good game last week against Texas. Played a pretty good game against Kansas. Played a pretty good game against Purdue. So they've been very choppy. No question. That being said, TCU, I've been impressed with the playmaking ability of TCU's wide receivers. And the QB's starting to make some plays downfield. And I'm telling you, Okie State, I know they won and they beat up Iowa State last week. They were still negative yardage in that ball game. I don't trust the Cowboys' defense. You ask me which of these two defenses is the better D. TCU's got the better D. And when you have the better defense catching points, sometimes you get interested. I would take the points before I laid here in a New York minute.
Let's move on to Flick My Bick. Our guy Flick My Bick says, I'm thinking about laying the 3.5 with Nevada in the nightcap, rotation 389, 390, New Mexico, Nevada, to support him laying the points with Nevada.
I don't know. I mean, I know I don't want New Mexico for what it's worth. So if I'm playing the game, it would be Nevada, and this is the game where Nevada is in theory supposed to bounce back after the two bad road losses. But I mean, this team, Nevada's been absolutely wiped out on 4 separate occasions this year, including 3 of their last 4 games, where they get punched and they're not punching back. And teams like that are not teams I'm looking to lay points with, flat out. Again, I don't want New Mexico, and the price is really cheap for Nevada if they show up. But when a team again and again isn't taking punches, well, if you're not responding to adversity, you're not a team I'm going to lay points with. Or frankly, I'm not going to take points with you either. The teams that don't respond to adversity are not, and when you see it repeatedly, those are the teams that have very big red flags for Nevada right now.
Up next right now is Rich G, and he's talking about a play that we know our very own Drew Martin is on. He says, please ask Teddy what he thinks about the UMass Liberty total at 70.
I mean, UMass, the only thing we can do with UMass is play their games over the total. All right. And Liberty is certainly a team that if you like overs, you've done all right in recent weeks, where they have 59-44 and then 44-34 the last 2 weeks. And neither of these two squads has a defense that we can trust. Both of these teams have the potential to do something offensively. I mean, UMass is they're not a 70 team. That's the concern for me. But if I had to play the total, I could only play it over. These are not teams I'm looking to play under.
And that was sort of what our guy Drew Martin was saying. I'd like to pull up Drew Martin's action here. He joined us on Monday and Tuesday. Let's do quick hits here on Drew Martin's action. If you approve or do not, we've already heard the Liberty UMass over and Memphis. So some of these games we already heard on. So I'll pull up. First one, I don't need to pull up the rotation number. It's a big, big game. Drew Martin is backing Florida this weekend. What do you think of that move?
Just real quick, we were talking about UCLA and Colorado. UCLA is getting popped right now. The 6.5s are disappearing quickly. So if you like the Bruins, I do it sooner rather than later. Sorry, I got distracted. You were talking. Oh, Florida. Oh, yeah, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. So there's a lot of things that make sense for the Gators this week. Certainly, from a defensive standpoint, Florida's been pretty good. We like Mullen as an underdog. Oh, we've seen Georgia's offense fail to produce like we expected them to in the games where they've stepped up in class on defense. The Notre Dame game really stands out to me in that regard, where, Georgia struggled to move the football throughout in that contest. And frankly, the QB play from Fromm hasn't been what I expected this year. All that being said, my gut says there's a class difference between these two teams. The money that poured in on Georgia at the opener tells me that I'm not the only one that thinks that way. And when you look at the upside, Georgia was supposed to be a national championship, national title contender, a team that can compete on an even field with Alabama, a team that can compete on an even field with Clemson. I don't get that sense from Florida. And it feels like the Gators are a real popular underdog in a big game this week, and that always concerns me. My initial lean was towards Florida. I'm not looking at the Gators anymore. I'm not going to get involved in the game, but the more I think about it, the more I think that the favorite here is the way to go.
The next spot on Drew's card came to us on Tuesday's Late Show, and it was backing FIU, rotation number 313, 314, Old Dominion FIU. FIU opens at -15, now -17.5. What do you think of him fading Old Dominion here?
Well, let's see. Old Dominion was just outgained by 160 yards by Western Kentucky, 238 by Marshall, 272 by UAB, and 226 by Florida Atlantic. They've let go of the rope in every one of those ball games. I can understand the flat, and especially with the game that Florida International played last week, where they, it didn't just go bad; it went real bad against Middle. Everything went wrong. They turned the ball over. The defense got gashed, et cetera, et cetera. It is a solid bounce back spot for the Golden Panthers, and I don't know that Old Dominion is going to be the team that can get in the way with that. FIU or pass. Of course, the best of the numbers gone. You bet it early, they can win by 17 and you'll cash. You bet it now and they win by 17. Sorry, not so much.
Next spot on Drew's card is rotation number 315, 316, Troy, Coastal Carolina. And Drew is backing Troy here in this spot. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue conceptually, but it's not a game I have a strong feel on at all. I mean, Troy, we've seen the defense get gashed enough that it really, again, 579 yards last week, 558 against Arkansas State, the Southern Miss game. I mean, over and over, I've seen this Troy defense get gashed. And, the Chanticleers, they're I don't know that they're good as Troy. That offense isn't moving the football on a regular basis. Only 228 yards, but they do have the extra time to prepare. I don't have a strong feel on it. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not a game that I've done a ton of work on. It's not a game that I'm close to betting. So good luck, Drew. I hope you win it.
Drew Martin, Big Ragu, Matt Randall are all backing Bowling Green against Akron, rotation number 327, 328. And we've seen movement towards Akron. Bookmaker down to 4.5. Should Bowling Green be back this weekend?
So I was asked about this game earlier in the week, and I'm like, is Bowling Green really the type of team that you want to be laying points with? Then you look at the other side of the equation. Akron, they haven't won a game. They haven't covered a point spread. And they've been god-awful. They haven't scored a point the last 2 weeks. They scored 3 the week before that. It's clearly a team that is a pretty easy fade. And when you're, 0-8 straight up and 0-8 against the spread, and you're, no chance to rest, no rest for the weary, you're going on the road, et cetera, et cetera. All right, it's a rivalry game. And Bowling Green's pretty ugly themselves, But at least BG's got a couple of wins on the season. The problem I have with laying with Bowling Green is, number one, I don't want to lay with Bowling Green. And number two is that just like BG is looking at this game as a win, so is Akron. Akron's like, this is the game. This is the team we can beat. We have a chance here. I'm not going to talk anyone out of BG. They may well be the right side. But, they've been outgained by 308, 209, 345, and 388 in 4 of their last 5 ball games. They're not a good team, and you're laying points with a bad football team. You sometimes get what you deserve.
Next spot on Drew's card, rotation number 349, 350, Texas State, Louisiana, Lafayette. He's laying this huge amount of points against this weak Texas State team. It opened at minus 22.5. Now there's a 22.5 at Heritage and Intertops, 23s, and a 23.5 at Pinnacle. Do you agree backing Lala here?
I'll say this much. I don't want any part of Texas State. So, if you want to bet against the kids from San Marcos, knock yourself out. That is, and again, it's a very limited offensive Bobcats team. They're not going to put up points in bunches against anyone. They struggle to put the ball in the end zone. And against a defense like the Raging Cajuns, you can anticipate that Texas State's going to struggle to move the football, and the defense is going to start to wear down. And, Lafayette, Lala off of the extra time to prepare off the bye. And they bounce back off the App State loss. And it makes a lot of sense. If I'm playing, I'm laying. I don't want the dog in this one.
And the final look on his card, markets moved in his direction on both. He liked the Middle Tennessee to cover. They opened up at 2.5. Now they're 3.5. If you want the 3, you can get it, but it's going to cost you minus 120. And then he liked the over in Middle Tennessee, Charlotte. That opened at 61 all the way up to 65 right now. What do you think of him backing Middle Tennessee and the over in Middle Tennessee, Charlotte?
I was tempted by both. I didn't pull the trigger on either. But I was tempted by both for what it's worth. I missed the best of the number with Middle, and I didn't want to lay 3 minus 20. I felt like if I wanted to get involved there, I should have laid the 2.5 at the open, and I thought about it, and I did, and I'm like, all right, now I'm not going to get the worst of it. But I certainly wouldn't talk you out of it. The Blue Raiders are, I think, a notch too better than that squad.
And then finally, our guy, Shadow, whom we love dearly, is asking about Virginia Tech, Notre Dame. This opened at 58. It's still there. There's a 57.5 on the board at Bet Online. But it's at minus 125 to the over, so I don't know if anybody wants that. And then minus 17.5. It opened for the Irish, and there are still 17.5s, but there are some 17s on the board. Final college game that we will be breaking down. What do you think of this spot, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame?
So the teams in the Notre Dame spot, that are now suffered their second loss of the season, and they ain't going to play for any national titles, and they ain't going to the playoffs. Those aren't teams I'm going to lay big prices with the following week. The question is whether you can take Virginia Tech plus. And the more I read about the game, the less interested I was in taking Virginia Tech plus. But that's the only way I can look. It really is. Given the spot for the Irish, I know Brian Kelly's talking the talk this week about, but sometimes you get you just smell the coach speak a little bit. You know what I mean? Kelly's trying to pump his kids up. What I was reading between the lines of what he was saying was that his kids are down in practice this week, and that tells me that it'd be Hokies or Pats. I just don't know if the Hokies can compete. The games that they're winning aren't against teams like Notre Dame, and I lean Virginia Tech. I've not pulled the trigger.
Lean Virginia Tech, have not pulled the trigger. We have got to put a bow on this, but why don't we touch on this very kind question? Where was it? How did I lose it? Maybe I put it on the wrong page. Let me grab it on the 29th here. My fault.
Hey, while you're doing that, let me jump real quick because I was talking about that UCLA game that is definitely moving to 7. And lo and behold, it moved to 7, and someone's betting it back to 6.5. So there's two-way action on that game, and you haven't missed your 7s. But a couple of key books moved to 7 and then right back down to 6.5. So somebody out there likes the other side.
Okay, well, so it's still available, which is good to know.
Yeah,
Available, which is good to know. I thought I copied and pasted Anthony's questions. I'm sure I did. Let me check if I did it on the Audible. Oh, instead. He had a couple looks that he wanted to ask you about in NFL, and I don't have them here. And I apologize, Anthony. I was sure I copied and pasted it. And so
you were doing it while we were talking.
I know. Oh, here we go. Anthony Devontae. Please ask Teddy about the Steelers game. And we talked about that, didn't we? We talked about that.
Yeah. I'm on Pittsburgh. I'm on Pittsburgh plus. I got Pittsburgh +1.
And then he wanted to talk about the Ravens game, Ravens Patriots. And we've seen that market move go back to 3. Any last thoughts on that big Ravens game?
So let's talk about that for a minute. I had the opportunity yesterday to talk with John Murray, the director of the Westgate Superbook here in Vegas. And we talked about this game in particular. And he's like, this is going to be the sharp square divide game of the century. He's like, this is by far, like every pro that we have is on Baltimore plus. And they've been the ones that betting this line down from 6.5. And he's like, we took a wise guy bet at 6.5 and it's 6. And we took another one at 5.5, another one at 5, and another one at 4, and on down the line. That is the sharpest of the sharp money. He's like, every parlay, every public bettor is on New England. Every one of them. He's like, there will be, so we're going to have wise guy liability and parlay liability. We're screwed either way. What he was basically saying about the Sunday night game. But that's a pretty strong sharp square divide game. And sharp money is, in general, in those type of games, I'd rather be with the sharp money than with the public money. Again, all that said, if you spent the last decade looking at sharp money New England games, it's probably hit about 5%. They fade the Patriots every week, and they lose every week. So, and it happened last year, and it happened the year before, and it happened every time I make a case against New England, unless it's Super Bowl and I have to put out a stupid play, and I end up on the stupid Rams in a stupid game. But with the exception of the Super Bowl, when you got to put out. When I'm looking to bet against New England, I pass the game. And this is one of those spots. I'm looking to bet against New England. And I've lost so much betting against New England that at this stage, all right, in Belichick we trust. I'm leaving it alone.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. And what an interesting spot it is. I can't wait for Sunday. In NFL, Teddy's on the Bills, Steelers, Browns, Lions, Raiders, over. In NCAA football, Teddy's on Oregon State +6, Boston College +3, Ole Miss +19.5, Hawaii -2.5. He gave us those on Tuesday. Wednesday, he gave us Nebraska -2.5, USC +5, UCLA -6.5, and today he's given up Central Michigan. And I like the bounce back spot for Central Michigan. That's very likely going to be a tail for me. Much love to you, Teddy. Thank you for putting in all your hard work, sharing your insights and angles with us all week long. You can catch Teddy Covers here every morning on Betting with the Bag, and what a great guy he is. Follow him on Twitter at Teddy_Covers. He is a great follow, and especially on Saturdays, the wild Saturdays. Teddy, my friend, I think we have a big weekend ahead of us, and I can't wait to be back in action with you Monday morning. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend.